Welcome in, everyone. Today we're diving into a story that feels ripped from the headlines, honestly. The assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah.
A real turning point in the region, no question.
Absolutely. We're talking about a figure who's been a major player in the Middle East for decades, and whose life and now death is going to have ripple effects across the globe.
We're wading through a ton of material on this one. News reports, military analysis, first-hand accounts from Beirut, you name it.
Because we need to understand not just what happened, but what it means. How does a life and a death like Nasrallah's reshape the entire geopolitical landscape? That's what we're here to unpack.
And it's a life story that reads like a political thriller, honestly.
Right. Imagine this. You're 32 years old. You're suddenly thrust into the leadership of a powerful paramilitary group.
And not just any group, Hezbollah, a force deeply embedded in Lebanon's political and military spheres.
After your predecessor is assassinated, by the way, by Israel.
Adds a whole other layer to it, right? And we have to remember the context here. Hezbollah emerges in the 1980s during Lebanon's civil war. They're backed by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. So from the outset, they're tangled up in this web of regional power plays.
So you've got this young Nasrallah thrown into the fire. What does he do? Well, according to one of these sources, he actually wrote a book, Hezbollah, The Story from Within, translated into multiple languages.
Talk about trying to control the narrative.
Right. It makes you wonder what kind of image he was trying to project.
It's a fascinating glimpse into his thinking. Nasrallah understood the importance of portraying Hezbollah as a legitimate resistance movement, fighting against Israeli occupation. This resonated not just within Lebanon's Shiite community, but across the Arab world.
And he was playing a long game, right? This wasn't just about one conflict or one battle. He spent decades building Hezbollah's military capabilities, amassing that massive arsenal of missiles that has everyone on edge.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. When we talk about Hezbollah's capabilities, we're not just talking about their ability to strike within Lebanon.
Oh, this is about something bigger.
Much bigger. They are a key part of what's known as the axis of resistance.
Okay, got to stop you right there. What is the axis of resistance?
Basically, it's this network of Iranian-backed groups. It includes Hamas in Palestine, the Houthis in Yemen.
So Iran's playing 3D chess across the Middle East.
Exactly. It's about projecting power, creating strategic depth. An attack on one group can't be viewed in isolation. It has ripple effects. And that's something Israel has to consider very carefully.
So Israel is now facing this enemy that's not just confined to one country or one front. They decide to take out Nasrallah. Is this a calculated gamble to disrupt this whole axis of resistance, or is it more about Hezbollah specifically?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer, as always, is complicated.
Right.
Israel's immediate goal was likely twofold. One, decapitate Hezbollah's leadership. Hope that it sows chaos and confusion.
Makes sense.
But second, and perhaps more importantly, send a message. We can reach you anywhere, anytime. Think about how this connects back to the axis of resistance. It's a warning to Iran, to Hamas, to anyone aligned against them.
A show of force.
Exactly. And it seems it was a carefully planned operation. Several sources point to Israel having real-time intel, knowing Nasrallah would be at a specific meeting. This wasn't just luck, it was precise, calculated.
But is that enough to cripple a group like Hezbollah? I mean, they've been around for decades. They've survived wars, internal power struggles.
And let's not forget, led by someone who understood that assassination was always a risk.
Right.
One analyst we read argues that Nasrallah had likely prepared for this moment, putting succession plans in place, potentially even grooming a successor in the shadows.
So it's possible that Israel, while landing a significant blow, might not have created the chaos they were hoping for.
That's the gamble they've taken. And now the question is, how will Hezbollah respond? You've got these incredibly powerful emotions swirling around grief, anger, a thirst for revenge. The on-the-ground reporting from Beirut, heartbreaking. One woman standing amidst the rubble said, "Wish it was our kids, not you, Sadie." Imagine that depth of feeling, that sense of loss.
It makes those calls for measured retaliation ring a little hollow, doesn't it?
Right.
You can't just issue a press release after something like that.
Exactly. Hezbollah's legitimacy is on the line. They've built their entire identity around resistance against Israel. Anything less than a forceful response. It risks alienating their base, even inviting challenges from within. Remember, there are other factions, other armed groups in Lebanon. This could get very messy very quickly.
Some of these reports suggest Hezbollah might target Israeli settlements, maybe even military positions. Is that enough? To satisfy that need for revenge while avoiding all-out war?
It might be their best option. strategically speaking. They can demonstrate resolve, appease their supporters, but it buys them time to regroup, assess their options. However, and this is crucial, we have to factor in Iran.
Right, that whole axis of resistance thing comes back into play.
Yeah.
Iran can't just let this slide.
Exactly. And here's where the stakes get even higher. If Iran decides that a direct response is necessary, not just supporting Hezbollah, but actively engaging, well, that's a whole new ballgame. We're talking about a potential regional conflagration.
So we're talking about a potential domino effect here. Hezbollah retaliates, Israel responds, Iran gets involved. It's you're giving me chills just thinking about it.
And it really highlights the interconnectedness of this region, these conflicts, you can't view them in isolation. They're all tangled up, this complex web of history, ideology, geopolitics.
Makes you wonder, what does this all mean for the future of the Israel-Lebanon conflict? Specifically, I mean, you've got this power vacuum now, this sense of uncertainty.
It's a critical juncture, no question. I'm seeing two broad scenarios emerge from the sources we've analyzed.
Okay, lay it on me.
First one, the more optimistic one, is that Hezbollah opts for a measured response.
Okay.
They consolidate power, maybe under a new leader, maintain that facade of stability, and we essentially see a return to the kind of status quo.
Return to like the low-intensity conflict, periodic flare-ups, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And for Israel, that might be seen as a victory, at least in the short term. They've eliminated a dangerous enemy, disrupted Hezbollah's operations, bought themselves some breathing room.
But there's that other scenario, the one where things spiral out of control. If Iran feels like they need to make a statement, show that there are consequences for targeting their allies,
then all bets are off. And this is where things get really scary, because Iran has options.
Like what?
They could activate their network of proxies, not just Hezbollah, but groups across the region. Imagine attacks on Israeli interests in, say, Syria or Iraq. Suddenly, you've got a multi-front conflict on your hands.
And the potential to drag in other regional players, too. I'm thinking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE. They're not exactly sitting on the sidelines cheering for Iran.
Exactly. It could escalate into a regional war with devastating consequences. We're talking massive casualties, economic collapse, the potential for a humanitarian crisis. And remember, the Middle East is a major energy producer. Any disruption there, it sends shockwaves through the global economy. This isn't just their problem, it's our problem.
So what's the takeaway for our listener, the person who's been following this story with us? What should they be paying attention to in the coming days and weeks?
Watch Iran.
Iran, okay.
Their next move. That'll be crucial. Are they sending diplomats to Beirut, trying to calm things down? Or are they moving troops and missiles, preparing for a confrontation? The signals are there, if you know where to look.
It's a lot to process. We've gone from the assassination of one man to potentially a region-wide conflict. I guess that's the nature of these deep dives. You never know where the rabbit hole might lead.
And sometimes it's not a rabbit hole, it's a powder keg.
That's a disturbingly accurate way to put it. Well, on that cheerful note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, explored the life and legacy of Hassan Nasrallah, the potential ramifications of his assassination, and the precarious future of the Israel-Lebanon conflict.
It's a complex situation, constantly evolving, no easy answers.
But as we always say on this show, the more informed you are, the better equipped you are to navigate the complexities of our world. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and never underestimate the power of a single event to reshape the geopolitical landscape.